Thank you, Lynn, for that very generous introduction, and also for noting social housing and housing affordability is a key priority of our government. And I appreciate you raising and providing an update on some of the things we've done. Can I also begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we stand and pay my respect to elders past and present? Can I acknowledge the very many distinguished Australians in this room, acknowledge our diplomatic corps and the consul generals who are here, acknowledge my colleagues in the New South Wales government, but also in particular Minister Stuart Ayres, who's the Minister for Western Sydney, WestConnex, and also Sport, who's here today, and thank him for the contribution he makes to New South Wales. But today is an absolute pleasure to be here. To get to talk about New South Wales relative to other states and how we're performing is an absolute joy. And I want to come here saying that as Premier for the last 6 months, the success that we've reaped today is because of 6 years of hard work, and nothing replaces hard work, and nothing replaces taking those difficult decisions we had to take to turn our budget and our economic position from last to first by a long mile, but also now appreciate that we are in a position of strength and we're able to invest not just in the hardcore infrastructure and services our state and residents desperately need, but also investing in that social infrastructure, which was a huge key focus of our budget this year. So again, I want to thank CEDA for your thought leadership. It's always a wonderful opportunity to be here and to have the opportunity to talk in more detail at some of the issues that we face, but also give you an update on how well New South Wales is doing. And it's extremely pleasing that at a time when there is so much global political uncertainty and in some places economic uncertainty, New South Wales is not just growing and thriving, but we're growing faster by a mile than any other Australian state and territory. In fact, we're growing faster than about 30 nations in the OECD if you took New South Wales as a separate jurisdiction. In fact, I'm not sure whether you can read that graph, but just to show you where Australia is and where New South Wales is, to show you how our growth prospects are compared to the OECD nations. And our economy in its own right is bigger than 16 of those OECD nations individually, including places like Greece and Portugal and Ireland and Denmark and Norway and Israel. So as a state, we're doing extremely well. And today we're driving about 90% of all output of growth in Australia. So if you contribute to our, if you look at what we're contributing to the national growth, we're extremely proud of that position. And our budget is so historically strong. And we know that this strong budget position is transforming our cities, but also our regions. I said on the day that I became Premier that I was very cognizant of the fact that I wanted to make sure every community in New South Wales felt it was receiving its fair share. Yes, Sydney is our global city, and you can see the transformation as you travel through Sydney, but also our regions are benefiting in a scale of which they've never done before. And how do we manage this position? Over the past 6 years, in reforms led by both Premiers O'Farrell and Baird, we restored fiscal discipline to the running of our government. We reduced our back office costs, some things that many of you have done in this room. And we also introduced wages reform throughout the public service. And this has allowed us to focus our efforts and our energy into boosting that front line, but also in making sure that we have such a strong balance sheet. And of course, our recycling asset recycling policy has meant through the completion of our poles and wires transactions and other transactions that not only do we have a $4.5 billion surplus, but we are in a cash positive position for the first time ever. So most state governments and the national government will talk about general government sector net debt. We're actually negative net debt or cash positive. And so much so that we actually have cash management strategies in place, which is a wonderful challenge to have in this environment, which often governments don't have the opportunity to have. And there are a number of people in this room that help us manage our cash in very good ways. But our investment in the scale of infrastructure we're creating also means that our net worth as a state is approaching $250 billion. And of course, it's easy to rattle off the phenomenal statistics, but what it means for the people of this great state, for the nearly 8 million people that live in New South Wales, that we're able to use these proceeds by reinvesting back into those communities through infrastructure and services. In fact, that graph there goes back to our net worth, which will increase by 40% in the next 4 years, which is huge. But also the $73 billion we're spending in infrastructure over the next 4 years, when you compare that to what the other states are spending, we're spending pretty much the same as what Queensland and Victoria combined are spending over the next 4 years. And the federal government is spending more on infrastructure than federal governments traditionally do, but they're spending the amount we're spending over 4 years over the next decade, just to put you in perspective of how much New South Wales is investing in infrastructure for the future. And of course, this investment will only increase our state's net worth. And it's also a very visual representation because above Sydney and across New South Wales, there are about 330 cranes in the sky on separate projects. And there are also 50 road headers and tunnel boring machines building the future tunnels and rail networks. But also we're revitalising our cities through projects like light rail and urban revitalisation. And we're giving Sydney, Australia's truly global city, the world-class infrastructure it deserves into the future. But I'm so pleased that the government's record investment in infrastructure is really giving confidence to the private sector to invest on the back of that. And today, New South Wales is home to almost half of Australia's corporate headquarters, and of course we've got an eye to increasing that. We are home to half of the technology sector and about half of all startups, and these are things we want to see grow into the future. And again, as the construction revolution has strengthened our state's reputation as the best place in the nation and also in the region to invest, in 2016, business investment in New South Wales grew by 10%. And you might think, well, that's pretty good, but across Australia it fell by 20%. So just to show you the relative strength of the New South Wales economy. And whether it's international companies working with Australian companies on our infrastructure pipeline, whether it's new startups that have listed on the ASX in the last 18 months alone, our state is becoming an even greater magnet for global commerce. Trading partners are buying our services, and of course our tourism, education and finance sectors are thriving in these global markets. And today we're not just Australia's powerhouse economy, we're also the jobs capital of the nation. And in the last 6 years we've created 370,000 jobs in New South Wales. And interestingly, about a third of these jobs, 130,000 of these new jobs, are in Western Sydney. And I'm also proud of the fact that 75,000 at least of these jobs are in regional New South Wales. So in some months, regional New South Wales is actually contributing to about half the jobs growth in New South Wales. And on this graph, I just wanted to state New South Wales's both unemployment rate, which is on the right-hand side, which is the lowest of all the states compared to the rest of Australia. And then on the left-hand side, you see our jobs growth rate, which far exceeds the rest of Australia as well. And of course, our challenge into the coming years is to sustain this success, is to take New South Wales to the next level. It's to continue building a stronger, more diverse, more globally competitive economy, but also to do what's responsible by our citizens in investing in that key social infrastructure which Lynn spoke about in her introductory remarks. And that's why for us it was very important in this year's budget, very ably delivered by our Treasurer Don Perrottet, to focus on our spend, or investment I should say, in our social infrastructure. It's incredible to think that in the next 4 years, we'll be spending nearly $8 billion on new and upgraded hospitals. We've already delivered 55 new health facilities, or upgraded 55 new health facilities in the last 6 years. But this investment will allow us to redouble our efforts. And we're also investing more than $3 billion on new and upgraded schools, as well as skilled professionals needed to staff both our schools and our hospitals. And by the end of this financial year, there will be more than 4,500 health workers compared to when we came to government, and almost 5,000 more teachers. So it's not just about building the bricks and mortar, but also investing in that frontline service capacity to meet the growing needs of our community, but also to keep ahead and stay ahead of future growth. But taking New South Wales to the next level means ensuring our rate of jobs growth keeps pace with the growth of our population. And it goes without saying that we are creating long-term job opportunities through the next phase of our infrastructure pipeline. And at the same time, we're enabling the private sector to grow and employ by reducing the burden of red tape and tax. Last year, I'm very pleased to say we abolished a number of business taxes totalling $1 billion over 4 years. And in this year's budget, we introduced insurance duty reforms worth up to $330 million for small, medium-sized businesses, including rural properties and farms. We continue to look to best ways that we can free up business to do what it does best. And this is alongside our investment in infrastructure, which is really contributing to the trend against the rest of the nation in terms of business investment. And of course, we will continue to focus on the skills we need to overcome capacity constraints and evolve our economy. It's in a very great position to be in when the capacity constraints we have in our infrastructure pipeline aren't capital, but it's making sure we have sufficient skills in the job market to ensure those projects can continue to be delivered at a pace at which we want them to be delivered. And over recent years, we've reformed our approach to skills development and vocational education specifically for this purpose. And today, skills programs are linked much more closely to the needs of industry, and we're investing more than $2 billion to support TAFE and other providers to ensure we have that pipeline of skills development, which is also assisted by the fact that many people from Western Australia and Queensland have moved back to New South Wales. So instead of working on a mining site, they're now working on a rail or road project here in New South Wales. But our jobs and skills agenda is targeting the major growth sectors of the future. One of our great advantages in New South Wales is that we're not reliant on a single dominant sector like mining or mass market manufacturing. We are Australia's hub for financial services. We have advantages in agribusiness and high-end manufacturing. We have leverage to global demand for resources, but we're not dangerously exposed like Queensland or WA to the commodities market. And we are the most coveted tourism destination in Australia at a time when demand from Asia is bringing record visitors to our shores. In the past decade, the number of annual international visitors to New South Wales has grown from 2.5 million to about 4 million. This economic diversity is our strength, and it gives us as a state the opportunities to take and withstand any shocks or turbulence we might experience. But our greatest advantage in the future will be our capacity to innovate as a state. And earlier this month, I was really pleased, along with the Deputy Premier, to announce, for example, a new startup hub here in Sydney. Government is supporting by contributing $35 million, but that will host up to 2,500 new entrepreneurs from across the state, people who will literally be able to knock on the door and offer their wares and have the opportunity to turn what is currently their pet idea into a global brand. And we're also investing $95 million to help high potential businesses grow through Jobs for New South Wales, identifying those gazelles and helping them manage their growth trajectory. And we are backing major STEM hubs like Westmead and the new Sydney Science Park in Luddenham. And of course, we're well advanced on preparations for the biggest economic opportunity of all, the new Western Sydney Airport, and what that will do for New South Wales in terms of jobs and skills, I believe is unprecedented. The new Western Sydney Airport will generate about $2 billion in economic value and more than 11,000 jobs in the construction phase alone. A development which, when complete, could ultimately generate 120,000 total jobs for the greater Western Sydney region. And I was delighted recently when a US firm, Northrop Grumman, has already jumped the gun and said they're investing $50 million to develop a defence centre of excellence in that precinct, and I'm sure that decision will spur others to come as well. In the coming weeks, I'll actually be travelling to Japan and Korea, promoting Western Sydney Airport, amongst other things, to both those nations, and I'm sure that the global interest will continue to increase. But creating opportunity through education, skills and jobs is the core of the government's plan for the future of New South Wales. At the same time, we understand the pressures and challenges that come with rapid growth, and we need to make sure that we bring our communities with us. For every person who's excited by the change and sees an investment opportunity, there's someone else who finds that change confronting or even feels left behind. And I think this is a challenge all Western democracies in particular need to be highly cognizant of. We need to appreciate that as we're moving through at a great pace, that every community feels they're receiving their fair share, but also that we're addressing some of the challenges that do come from growth and changing environments. We are tackling housing affordability. We are working on issues regarding the cost of living, because we appreciate that even though our success as a state is unprecedented, that families and individuals continue to do it tough. So whether it's in complex areas of reform like CTP reform, which will see a huge reduction in green slips, or whether it's determining energy rebates, we're making sure that the strong budget and economic position also allows us to take care of those most vulnerable. And whether it's through direct government funding or social impact investments, or working with the private sector and not-for-profit sector, that is something extremely important to us. And we know this state has a strong New South Wales means a strong Australia. And our contribution to the national economy is certainly witness to that. However, I do believe there is a time now to argue for a new model of dynamic federalism to replace the outdated concept of cooperative federalism. And this is because when the Federation was first adopted, the states were very similar in their populations, their scale and ability to contribute to the national economy. But now New South Wales is at a stage where I believe we need to move towards a bilateral relationship with the federal government, rather than assuming that all the states are going to have the same unique circumstances and agree on every single issue. For example, New South Wales currently has 42 national agreements with the federal government. That is too many, and I want to see that number reduced substantially so that we can get on with the job of not having any barriers to future growth and opportunities for the people of New South Wales. And tomorrow we'll also be making a submission to the Productivity Commission about the need for changes in our model of GST distribution. That's no surprise, we've said that before. And over the next 4 years, under the current system, New South Wales will effectively subsidise other states and territories by $19 billion. And I can appreciate that some states have very unique circumstances and challenges, and we will always, should and will subsidise those states. But it's very painful to give the Queensland government more than $6 billion over the next 4 years. One would argue that they've not tackled the types of reform that we have done, and we know sometimes you do lose a bit of political skin to do what's right. We encourage other states to do what New South Wales has done because the rewards are apparent. But it's quite painful when you're subsidising the other states who haven't done the reforms we have to the extent we are. And certainly I believe it's time to relook at that formula. And again, we assume responsibilities as the nation's largest state, as the strongest economy, that we do have a role to play in supporting other states, but clearly not at the level that's being indicated on that graph. But today, decisions over $60 billion in Commonwealth funding are made by the Commonwealth Grants Commission, and it's a body that I'm sure few Australians, I'm sure all of you in this room have heard of that body, but I'm sure few Australians outside this room have really heard of that, of the CGG. But decisions are really challenged. It's not subject to any reviews or audits, and I think it's time to be much more transparent in how that formula works and what it means for taxpayers in each state. But ladies and gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to be able to report on the success story that's New South Wales. New South Wales is a standout global economy, full stop, whether you compare us to the other states in Australia, or whether you compare us to the OECD nations, or whether you even compare us to our regional economies. We're leading Australia on jobs, on growth, on investment, on infrastructure. And now we are taking the state to the next level. We're investing record amounts in that social infrastructure, which is so necessary to make sure the population comes with us on this journey of taking New South Wales to the next level. Unprecedented investment in infrastructure and services brings with it its challenges. And that's why we want our communities to appreciate that we are compassionate as well as being economic rationalists. We're moving into the next phase of the infrastructure revolution with a pipeline stretching into the future, and it's no secret whatsoever that we've already done the planning and are working on the planning for the next generation of projects. We don't want anyone in New South Wales to down tools, quite the contrary. We want everybody to assume the pace will only increase into the years ahead. We're diversifying our economy and we're creating jobs and skills we need to meet the challenges of the future. And we're entering a new period of sustained economic growth, which is unprecedented, and innovation that will benefit everyone in our great state. Thank you for your attention today, and please be very direct and frank in your questions. Thank you very much.